I guess what I'm saying is that we are here to share best practices, and I hope we're going to learn from each other. Let me move, and then let me welcome Mr. Silman, Director, Naledi Unit, Department of Education, to come and give us a welcoming address. Let's give him a round of applause. We can do better than that.
Mbuli, MEC Machwe, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. On behalf of Minister Mochecha and DG Subrian, I thank you for being here this morning. I'm delighted to have this opportunity to share with you some of the work that the DBE has done and continues to do to improve the quality of public schooling. Can you hear me? Okay, right. The work that we are doing to improve the quality of public schooling in South Africa, that's probably not a comfortable thing to hear for many people, because we have the perception that nothing is happening and what may be happening is not very good. That's not the case. I want you to leave here today confident in the knowledge that the DBE wants and needs and encourages collaboration and cooperation with yourselves as representatives of private enterprise. We want to harness your collective capacity to make significant contributions to the improvement of the outcomes that we can see in the education sector, the basic education sector specifically in the country. My focus is sciences and the sciences and maths. Now, I've got an inkling that you might be expecting to hear yet another address full of rose-tinted spin and hot air that emphasizes only the good and ignores the bad. I'm going to have to disappoint you, because I'm going to deal with as much and as many of the issues that I possibly can in the time that I have to speak with you today. It's only by identifying the weaknesses within the system that we can actually address them and provide redress. It's an unpleasant job to stare things in the face that we know are not working. But the fact is, we can't fix what we don't know is broken. And the thing is that we are learning as a country that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Leave it alone. Nevertheless, we have made significant progress, and this is perhaps a perspective that you haven't been exposed to. So you'll forgive me for dealing with a couple of the things that we have in fact achieved that don't get particularly good mention in the popular media. And I'm not suggesting for a moment that there is any kind of concerted effort to denigrate the efforts of the Department of Basic Education. I don't believe that's the case. I think it's just a function of normal society that wants to look for the interesting and the slightly offbeat. That's the way it is. Bad news sells papers. Good news perhaps doesn't. Now, one of the things that is perhaps underplayed and underemphasized in terms of its importance are the annual national assessments. Now, these are called the ANAs. ANAs, when I first heard the term, I thought, who is ANA? Because people were talking about, we're going to introduce the ANAs, and who are they? Well, annual national assessments are simply diagnostic tools that have been designed to assess the capacity of our children in grades 3, 6, and 9 last year to deal with the work at the appropriate levels, being grades 3, 6, and 9. Now, in a nutshell, they really are just diagnostic tools. I want to point out something to you. We have a major focus on grade 12. It's the big story for the end of every year. That involves administering a system that involves about 500,000 children. the ANAs is 10 times bigger. 10 times. It's the biggest national assessment of any schooling system in the world. This is an amazing thing for a country like South Africa to be able to do. And we have done it. The people who administered and ran the system, I stand in awe of them because it is a massive, massive undertaking to distribute, disseminate, set the tests, mark the tests, moderate the tests, and then come up with results. And then in addition to that, we have a minister who stands up and says, sorry, we've got a bit of improvement here, we've got quite a lot of improvement there, but over here, and I'm referring to grade 9 maths, we have a disaster. That was the word she used. The grade 9 mathematics results are disastrous. She tells the truth. That is the reality that we have. But there's good news. This year's assessments showed some improvements in grades 3 and 6, indeed. I am not going to disagree with the big boss. They were disastrous, the results for grade 9. But I want to put the results against the backdrop of grade 12. Now, class, listen carefully. The fact is that only 2% of the grade 9s, 2% of the grade 9s, achieved 50% as a mark in the mathematics ANA. 2%. That's 2 out of every 100 that achieved the mark of what we would consider, as lay people perhaps, a pass mark, 50%. But here's the good news. The fact is that if we look at grade 12, and there was much play and emphasis placed on the predictive capacity of the ANAs in terms of future grade 12 results. If we look at the grade 12 results, what we have is a 5-fold increase in the number of grade 12 candidates that passed mathematics at that 50% level. In fact, with the 2011 results, never mind last year, but the previous year, the proportion of grade 12s that got over 60% was 12%. That's almost, well, it is just short of six times more pupils passing at that level than what we see in the grade 9 ANAs. The point is that something good must have been happening in the system to change from grade 9 to grade 12. The teachers must have been teaching, and the children must have been learning, because proportionately, there are 6 times more that are achieving at a good level. I'm not saying that it's good enough. It isn't good enough. We all recognize that. The fact is that there is activity and there's positive results, that are coming out. Within the space of only 3 years, 2/3 of the schooling system, that's the schooling system by grade, is supported by the provision of textbooks and workbooks. Now, by the end of 2014, CAPS, now we love the acronyms, don't we? South Africans love acronyms. What's CAPS? Well, CAPS stands for, does anybody know CAPS? You've heard of CAPS? Yes? Okay. It's the Curriculum and Assessment Policy. What it is a single, comprehensive, and concise policy document that replaces, essentially, the outcomes-based curriculum that we had in place for the previous half a dozen years or so. It didn't work, and Minister Motshekga took the brave step of saying, it's not working, doesn't matter why, it's not working, it's not appropriate, we need to change it, and change it we have. And she took that brave step. She took a lot of flack on that one too. The current curriculum specifies in very clear detail what has to be learned and how that learning has to be tested. Notwithstanding a repeat of last year's textbook fiasco, particularly the Limpopo issue, state schools will be provided and are being provided with textbooks and workbooks and study guides in sufficient quantities to ensure that every pupil has a textbook or a workbook for each subject. Universal textbook coverage is something that South Africa has never had. Never had. This is a massive undertaking. Every now and again, and yesterday was the case in point, we heard the numbers coming out that, oh, well, there are so many tens of thousands of books that have not yet been delivered. What isn't coming across particularly clearly, and it's unfortunate, is that millions of books, workbooks and textbooks, have been delivered. Now, I have to say, if I was a child that was one of those who didn't get the book, and we're talking about an amount of 42,000 out of 2.5 million, specifically referring to Limpopo, if I was one of those kids not getting my book, then the effect is catastrophic, and so it's not acceptable. But if we just look at the numbers, step back from it a moment, and give a gross overview, what we have is 98.5% delivery to the schools, in the schools, 98.5%. That's not too bad, given that there was nothing happening there before. A year ago, the situation was below ground level. What else has been achieved? This is the rosy stuff, but it's not, it's simply true. It is the case. I beg your pardon. Kwashiorkor. Does anybody remember Kwashiorkor? Yeah. Okay. It's a form of malnutrition that was endemic and widespread in South Africa up until not so long ago. Now, it's caused by a protein deficiency. Poor people can't afford protein. It's expensive. Simple as that. Our country has lots of poor people. I'm sure that many of you sitting in this room come from very modest homes, modest and poor. I can't claim to come from a poor home, a modest one, but I was never hungry and I had enough protein. But we had a system, not so long ago, that consciously, I believe, tried to dumb down the mass of our population by stunting the development of children. Now, that's a really sick thing to do. And it's a subtext. It's not something that we hear about or think about when we talk about the legacy of apartheid. But the fact is that there was a determined policy to dumb down and reduce the capacity of African children in particular to be able to cope with high-level academic tasks, academic and technical tasks. Those kids with the swollen bellies and the little stick arms. I can tell you that I travel around the country quite extensively, and I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it at all. I haven't seen one child that is suffering from kwashiorkor. And I've spent, since the 7th of January this year, I've spent 14 days at home, and the rest of the time I'm out in the provinces. I haven't seen one child, and I'm at the school. I'm not sitting in a head office somewhere. This administration, through the National Nutrition Program, the School Nutrition Program, has seen to it that kwashiorkor is not there anymore. This is it's such a fundamental thing. If we talk about capacitation, we have capacitated children to be able to deal biologically and physiologically with intellectual tasks at a high level. That's a massive thing. It's not going to make the papers, though. It sits below the surface, doesn't it? It does. I believe it does. But it's a fundamental change. That's a really big thing to have achieved in a country like South Africa, where we have the super rich and the excessively poor. What we have now are millions of appropriately nourished children and a curriculum with clearly specified content. We've got exit exams at grade 12 that are set and administered nationally, not each province doing its own thing, or each administration. We've got the House of Assembly, and then we've got the Department of Education and Training, or Bantu Education, and then the Homelands doing their things. We have one coherent system. We don't have the leaks and the cheating that we saw not so long ago. The system now works. That's a pretty big thing. Contrary to public perception, getting a university entrance pass, and that's the term that I'm going to use, it's not called that anymore. We call it a bachelor's pass, the entrance to a bachelor's degree program. For people of our vintage, I think a university entrance pass is well understood, though. It's now more difficult for a candidate to achieve that university entrance pass than it was in former years. I'd love to do a straw poll and see, by show of hands, how many people think it's more difficult to get a university pass now than it was in former years. May I do that? Would you mind? Raise your hand, please, if you think it's more difficult to get a university entrance pass now than it was in former years. Okay, thank you. Then my understanding is correct. Most of us, and by us I mean population of South Africa, believe that standards are lower and it's easier to pass, and there's a 30% pass rate, a 30% pass level that's been set. I think that the bulk of us in this room today think that we believe that you just need 30% and you pass. It's not the case. I'm going to read to you, because I have to, because it gets a little technical, but I'm going to read to you the following. When we were at school, a candidate needed to pass 4 subjects at 40% and 2 subjects at 33 1/3. So it's 4 at 40 and 2 at 33 1/3. Now, admission to university studies requires a pass in 4 subjects at the 50% level, with the remaining 2 subjects being acceptable at 30%. Now, where is this 30% pass or 30% university entrance pass? It's not there. You have to get 4 subjects at 50%. I just don't get it. All that's happened is that we focused on the 30% that is in there, and then we forget that there formerly was a 33 1/3. Well, 33 1/3, 30%, it doesn't mean much. But between 40 and 50, that means a lot. Fact is, with these are more stringent conditions, and yet we are getting more kids into university. I know that we are told, and you may believe, that kids are coming out of universities and they can't do anything, or they haven't learned anything, or they haven't had rigorous training. I just want to point out one thing. We, as older people, suffer from a condition that when we were young, older people suffered from then, and that is the youth of today. Look at the youth of today. And we see the finger wagging, and we forget that actually that is our prerogative, to look at younger people moving through our society and elevate ourselves. So look at them. They don't know the meaning of hard work. Nonsense. Kids today are no different, in essence, than kids have ever been. And older people are also no different. We still have the view that generations younger than ourselves are really not as hardworking, not as smart, not as committed or dedicated as we were when we were young. I think that's just part of the human condition. My experience of working in a school, and I'm not an experienced bureaucrat, I'm just a school teacher. I spent the last 25 years working in school and teaching in the classroom. I don't think kids have changed at all. Circumstances have changed. Kids are just kids. The problems that we face in schooling are well known, but what I want you to take away from this gathering is the certain knowledge that there is a clear and welcoming conduit, and this is really probably the most important thing that I can say to you. There is a clear and welcoming conduit in the Department of Basic Education that has a specific mandate to focus on maths, science, and technology education. Given that most large enterprises set aside resources in cash or in kind for social investment purposes, a significant part of my work is to assist and direct you to parts of the system where your contribution will be maximally beneficial. In practical terms, this means identifying schools that have a need that your company is best placed to fulfill. Part of the Dinaledi program is the Adopt a School mechanism, whereby a company can develop a deeper and more concentrated relationship with a particular school, rather than having a wider but shallower relationship with a larger number of schools. If I'm talking too long, start muttering and then I'll get the message. May I continue? Thank you. No. The Dinaledi program is located strategically within the larger context of the Maths, Science and Technology implementation plan of the DBE's Maths and Science strategy. It's an improvement strategy. And it draws specifically, and it's supported conceptually by the National Development Plan that Minister Manuel's been working on in particular, as well as, of course, the action plan of the Department of Basic Education. My colleague, Dr. Nduna Watson, sitting next to me at the table there, is responsible for overall all the 10, 11, and 12. That's the FET phase, the end of high school. The Dinaledi program locates itself, in a sense, as a spear point of the Maths and Science Improvement Strategy within the broader Maths and Science Improvement Strategy. Excuse me. We have a couple of focuses. At the moment, although more girls than boys take maths, fewer girls pass than boys. This focus on girls is not for the sake of gender sensitivity, and there is a focus on girls in particular. It's not for politically correct purposes. It's a pragmatic response to address the consequences of deeply and widely held beliefs that maths and science are not subjects for girls, and that this attitude plays itself out in the classrooms where boys get more attention, particularly from male teachers of science and maths, than the girls do. For example, 100,000 girls enrolled for maths, 50,000 passed. Boys, 80,000 enrolled, and 60,000 passed. See where the problem is? More are taking the subject, but proportionately less are passing. It's not good enough. We need to provide redress for that. The Dinaledi program that I'm responsible for is funded by the National Treasury through a conditional grant. And the implication of this type of funding is that the outputs, in other words, what the grant has to do, are clearly specified in a grant framework that has to be adhered to. It's a way of ring-fencing, in a way, ring-fencing the activities that the money can be spent on. And the focus is on 500 of the 6,000 high schools in the country. So what we have is 500 schools that conform to particular criteria that allow us to then focus the 100 million rand or so a year on those schools. It works out to about 200,000 rand per school per year. The distribution of that funding is made available from the national department through to the provincial departments, who develop business plans based on the needs that they've identified in the particular schools. And in that way, we cut through a lot of the red tape, in a way, the bureaucratic obstacles and stumbling blocks that are inherent in a system as large as the basic education system. It's the conditions of the grant are really designed to incentivize schools to increase the numbers of pupils that choose maths and science. Since the choice of subject is made at the end of grade 9, what we are doing now is focusing on grade 9 and grade 8 rather than just at grade 12. The reason is that unless we attend to the deficiencies that kids have brought with them from primary school, and there are huge knowledge gaps. The ANAs show this clearly, and other diagnostic tests that are international benchmarks show that children are moving from primary schools with huge knowledge gaps. We need to address those knowledge gaps at the grade 8 and 9 level. Optimally, best case scenario would be to deal with it at foundation phase. It hasn't happened. It hasn't been happening. What we can do, though, is focus on grade 8 and 9. And at the end of grade 9, if children have the confidence in their own competence to deal with maths and science, they will take those subjects. That's the only way we're going to increase the number of matriculants that have got maths and science as part of their school exit package. It's at the choice point being at the end of grade 9. If we don't address that issue, we will never increase significantly the number of children leaving at the matric level because they won't have made the decision to choose the subject for grade 10. So what we are doing is particularly focusing on grade 8 and 9 now. It's no good just plugging the dike at the grade 12 level and trying to fix 11 years of deficiencies. It's what we've been doing, and it has borne fruit, but it's not the most effective way, and it will not end up in having more kids taking the subjects that the country needs. Excuse me. I'm certain that what we're doing now, I'm absolutely certain that what we're doing now will result in a very different and a much improved performance profile throughout the country in the coming decade. That means the kids in junior primary school now, when they get to grade 12, we will have a completely different picture. Ladies and gentlemen, if I didn't believe that this really was the case, if I didn't believe that we will see huge, huge differences within the next decade, I wouldn't be standing here. I really wouldn't be standing here. My father used to say to me, you know, when the job is more important than the work, it's time to go. Well, I'm staying, and I invite you to stay too. Thank you very much indeed for this opportunity to speak to you.
Thank you for doing your work, because you are saying this is not just a job, it's an extension of your calling. Can I just make this announcement or this request to other fellow speakers, that if you can make your presentation not to be more than 15 minutes. I know that we get tempted, some of us as preachers, as business people, as eloquent speakers. Let's try so that at least by 11 o'clock, we're about to finish. Are we all together? Do you all agree? Are we in one accord? So that we can also give the thought leaders that are here to interact with the speakers. Because the purpose for today is to have these conversations, to come up with the best practices, to forge partnerships. And I'm happy that Mr. Silman, you are sitting next to Peter, the trustee of the foundation, and I hope that you're going to cross-pollinate and see how we can work together with the